why. Now we're going to look at Chapter 2, Biology and the Behavior, and this is going to be the second part of this chapter. So in this second part, this video will review the brain across a lifespan, discovering the brain's mysteries, and the peripheral nervous system, which, if you remember, is the second part, and the endocrine system. So we're going to start with the brain across the lifespan, and we'll now map out the major development of changes in the brain across a lifespan. And it's really developed a lot of technology which enables us to better understand the brain and its functions. Now, the brain grows in spurts from conception until well into adulthood. Now, when I was first studying psychology back in the middle to late 70s, the idea that someone in their advanced years, over 50 say, would still be able to grow new brain cells and neurons was sort of not seen as possible. That stopped in early life, and it just basically degraded over the rest of your life. But in fact, we find that it goes well into adulthood, where brain growth and development and neural development can continue. Now, these spurts are correlated with major advances in physical and intellectual skills. Now, each spurt also seems to involve a different brain area. The spurts from 17 to 20 primarily affects the frontal lobe. The brain weight begins to decline around age 30. Now, it's not declining at such a rate that by the time you get to 50 or 60, you got no brain left. The brain's quite comprehensive. Age-related deficits due to the loss of gray matter are common. Now, we notice that Alzheimer's, dementia, and other forms of age-related brain issues. For example, elderly people tend to experience problems with balance. However, as is true in childhood, intellectual and motor training can positively influence the brains of older people. A lot of the research has been moved towards the more engaged older people are and the more active they are. That's muscle development as well as respiratory development. The longer they can live and the stronger their brains become. The brain's ability to recognize and to compensate for brain damage is termed plasticity. Brain plasticity has been a relatively new development in the awareness of brain capacity. The ability of the brain and the spinal cord to change both in structure and function is referred to as neuroplasticity. So one of the elements about neuroplasticity is if a part of the brain dies, for example, as in a stroke, where a portion of the brain is non-functioning and leaves an effect on the outside and the way the person works, in some cases and in some manner, the brain can borrow neurons from another area to take on the role of that part of the brain that has died and reconstitute, if you will, some functions of the brain. And that's what's known as neuroplasticity. Now, one type of cell that facilitates these changes are stem cells. Stem cells are magic cells. Not really, but they have the ability that some abilities lost through brain damage can be regained if areas near the damaged area take over that lost function. And that's the role of what these stem cells will do. Stem cells can become any other cell in our body. It's a really important cell. Plasticity is greatest in young children whose hemispheres haven't yet been completely lateralized. Some individuals who have an entire hemisphere removed early in life because of uncontrollable epilepsy have been able to lead near normal intellectual lives. So pay attention to that. Some people have had an entire hemisphere, half the brain gone because of uncontrollable epilepsy, and they can lead near normal intellectual lives. That's plasticity. I mean, the whole part of the brain is missing, and yet you could meet them and maybe really not assume that to be an issue. What tools used to study the brain? If we're going to study it, how do we study it? Well, the tools include electroencephalographs, computerized axial tomography, magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, and position emission topography, or PET. These are common tools being used in today's environment to study the brain and see how it functions. We can study the brain by using deep lesions to destroy certain areas of the brain in laboratory animals, or by electrically stimulating those areas, or ESB. Maybe you've heard of the experiment that was done, or it was a procedure that was being done, and the person had open brain surgery, and they were stimulating different parts of the brain through electrical stimulation. And the person, of course, when you're having brain surgery, you're not out cold, you're conscious, you can speak. And this person was being asked, what sensation do you have now when they're stimulating different parts? And the person had responded, well, I smell burnt toast. Well, they didn't actually have burnt toast in the operating room, but that part of the brain was stimulated where that memory had been stored. Just amazing. We can use case studies of human brain damage to learn about the brain's functions, but we cannot easily generalize from one case to another. The EEG, or the electroencephalogram machine, allows researchers to look at the activity of the surface of the brain through the use of microelectrodes placed on the scalp and connect to an amplifier and a computer for data recording and analysis. So in this instance, you're producing the data from brain waves, and it's going into a computer where you can then visually see what the brain activity is like. CT, or computerized axial tomography, scans are computer-aided X-rays of the brain and show a great deal of brain structure. The MRI, or the magnetic resonance imaging, scans use a magnetic field and a computer to give researchers even more detailed look at the structure of the brain. A related technique is the fMRI, which is a functional magnetic imaging, resonance imaging, and it allows researchers to look at the activity of the brain during various mental tasks. So in the case of an fMRI, if it's being used on you, you would be given a task to do. Remember how many socks you have in your drawer, and as you're searching for that, the machine, the fMRI machine, is able to watch you do that in real time, and they can slow it down extremely slow to watch that movement of where those memories exist in your brain. The PET, or the position emission tomography, scans use a radioactive sugar injected into the bloodstream to track the activity of the brain cells, which is enhanced and color-coded by a computer. And you may have seen images of all these machines at some point in your search, especially if you're involved in the medical field in your education. EEG, or the electroencephalogram, it measures electrical activity occurring in the brain. It can show an epileptic seizure process and can be used to study neural activity in people with learning disabilities, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's disease, sleep disorders, and other neurological problems. Now, while the EEG is able to detect electroactivity in different areas of the brain, it cannot reveal what is happening in individual neurons, while microelectrodes can. Now, a microelectrode have been used to discover the exact function of single cells within the primary visual cortex and the primary auditory cortex. That's powerful information to be able to witness. The CT reveals the structures within the brain or other body parts, as well as the abnormalities or injuries, including tumors and old or recent strokes. So MRIs, well, it's that powerful diagnostic tool that can be used to find abnormalities in the central nervous system and other systems of the body. fMRI can image both brain structures and brain activities by examining changes in oxygen flow within the brain. It has the ability to image precise locations of activity, detecting changes that take place in less than a second. PET scans are powerful instruments for identifying malfunctions that cause physical and or psychological disorders, and are also for studying normal brain activity. The PET can also map patterns of blood flow, oxygen use, and consumption of glucose, and it will show the action of drugs and other biochemical substances in the brain and other organs, which could, of course, can be extremely powerful in terms of diagnosis and understanding certain disorders. Now, next, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the peripheral nervous system. Now, we're going to identify and explain the function of the two components of the peripheral nervous system. Now, remember from part 1, our nervous system is divided into 2 parts, and we have in part 1 explored the first part, the central nervous system. We're now going to look at the second part, which is the central of our central nervous system, which is the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system connects the central nervous system to the rest of the body, and it has 2 subdivisions. First, the somatic nervous system, which consists of nerves that make it possible for us to sense and move, and secondly, an autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has 2 parts. A sympathetic nervous system, which mobilizes the body's resources during emergencies or during stress. So it's the things that we use to cope with stress and how our body braces ourselves. And secondly, it's the parasympathetic nervous system, which is associated with relaxation and brings the heightened body response back to normal after an emergency. Now, anytime you are faced with stress or in an emergency, the sympathetic nervous system automatically mobilizes the body's resources, preparing for action. Now, this results in the fight or flight response. Specifically, this increases the heart rate and respiration, enhances blood flow to the skeletal muscles, and almost shuts down the digestive system, because it's something you don't need to be doing, digesting food while you're under stress. You need to be putting all your resources towards dealing with the stress, not leisurely digesting food. So the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for bringing your bodily functions back to normal after stress or emergency is over. As a result of its action, your pulse, your breathing return to normal, as does your digestive system. So next, what we'll look at is the endocrine system and to identify the components of the endocrine system. The endocrine system is a series of ductless glands found in various parts of the body that manufacture and secrete chemicals, known as hormones, from the Greek word to excite. The pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, and the pancreas and sex glands all have important roles in the function of our body and that in turn influences behavior. Hormones are secreted directly into the bloodstream, influencing the activity and muscles and organs. The pituitary gland is considered to be the master gland of the body because it releases hormones that turn on or activate other glands in the endocrine system. The pituitary gland is found in the brain just below the hypothalamus. The pituitary also produces the hormone that is responsible for body growth. The thyroid gland is located inside the neck, and it controls metabolism, the burning of energy, by secreting thyroxine. The adrenal glands are a pair of endocrine glands that release hormones that prepare the body for the emergencies and stressful situations. They are glands that prepare the body for emergencies and stressful situations and also release small amount of sex hormone. The pancreas, it regulates the level of sugar in the blood and secreting insulin and glucagon. Too much insulin produces hyperglycemia, while too little causes diabetes. The sex glands or gonads are the ovaries in women and testes in men. They secrete hormones to regulate sexual growth, activity, and reproduction. Now again, a pretty quick overview of this area on Chapter 2. Now, as much as this has been very important because it's, your brain and behavior and that relationship, it's just a part of the overall flavor of psychology, but a big part of what psychology is looking at the role of our brain in relationship to some of the other things that we do. If we look at this particular semester and look at your chapter headings, you'll see some of the areas in which in almost every chapter the brain will be a portion of that chapter to help us understand those elements of psychology. All right, so that's the end of chapter 2. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please make sure, as I mentioned after video 1, part 1 on this chapter, is use your textbook along with the videos to make note about what's important to make note of and explanations that might help you better understand the content. All right, so good luck with this, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, I'm in Owen Sound every Thursday in the morning in the library. I'm available for you to drop by and say hi and to, of course, answer any questions. All right, everybody, good luck and keep up the good work. Bye now.